He isn't the president, he isn't the Secretary of State. He doesn't hold any federal office whatsoever, so why is the governor of California standing on a stage in Davos, Switzerland, telling the European Union how to handle American foreign policy picture? This Gavin Newsom breathing crisp Swiss mountain air at 5,000 feet above sea level, telling a room full of international elites that Donald Trump's economic strategy is, and I quote, stupidity, bold words for a man whose own state is technically insolvent, bold words for a governor who left behind 117,000 Californians who just received letters informing them their housing vouchers are about to disappear. I'm Elizabeth, and this is Maddo News. If you want the unfiltered economic truth that no other channel is willing to report, hit that subscribe button right now, and I need you to do something else. Comment below and tell me, what state are you watching from? Are you seeing your governor jet off to international conferences while your streets fill with tents? Because we need to document this pattern. It's happening everywhere, but California is the blueprint. Let me set the scene for you, because if you only watch the mainstream coverage, you'd think Newsom just saved democracy. The World Economic Forum in Davos, January 2026, the annual gathering where billionaires and politicians pretend to care about inequality while staying in hotels that cost $12,000 per night. And there's Gavin Newsom, governor of California, population 39 million, GDP of $3.9 trillion, sitting on a panel titled The Future of American Leadership, not as a guest, not as an observer, as a featured speaker. And what does he say? He looks directly into the camera, knowing full well this will be clipped and shared across every news network in America, and he calls the president's trade policy stupidity. He tells the European ministers in attendance that they should prepare for an America that no longer honors its commitments. He positions himself as the reasonable American, the adult in the room, the guy Europe can actually trust. Here's what he didn't mention during that 45-minute panel back home in California. The Department of Housing and Urban Development just announced an immediate freeze on Section 8 voucher funding. That freeze impacts 117,000 California families. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's not a statistic, that's the entire population of Burbank, California. That's every single person in Berkeley gone, evicted within 90 days. The federal government, under new budget reconciliation rules, cut HUD's California allocation by 62%. 62%. The official letter went out on January 14th. Newsom was wheels up to Zurich on January 15th. Coincidence, you tell me? While he was in the air, landlords across Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, and San Diego started receiving automated notices that their tenants' vouchers would not be renewed. 72 hours later, the eviction notices started going out. Have you noticed this in your neighborhood? Are you seeing the for rent signs multiply? Are you seeing families packing U-Hauls in the middle of the night? Because the data we're seeing suggests this is already happening, and your governor is in Switzerland drinking wine with Klaus Schwab. Now let's talk about what Newsom actually said at Davos, because the media is treating it like some kind of heroic act of resistance. He stood on that stage and said, "We cannot allow one man's stupidity to define our relationship with our oldest allies." He said California will continue to lead on climate, on trade, on human rights, regardless of what Washington does. He got a standing ovation. The European press called him America's real leader. Der Spiegel ran a headline, "The governor who should be president." But here's the thing, they're not telling you Gavin Newsom doesn't have the constitutional authority to conduct foreign policy. That power belongs exclusively to the federal government. There's actually a law about this. It's called the Logan Act, passed in 1799, and it explicitly forbids private citizens from negotiating with foreign governments on behalf of the United States. Now, is Newsom a private citizen? Technically, no, he's a state official, but is he authorized to promise European leaders that California will maintain trade relationships independent of federal policy? Absolutely not, and yet that's exactly what he did. He told the Prime Minister of Denmark on camera that California would continue to honor our commitments to Greenland's renewable energy sector, regardless of federal tariff policy. He told the German finance minister that California's ports will remain open to European goods, even if other states close theirs. This isn't diplomacy, this is a shadow presidency. This is a governor of one state attempting to position himself as a parallel executive to the actual president of the United States. Why is he doing this? Let me connect the dots for you, cause this is where it gets interesting. Newsom is 48 years old. He's term limited as governor. His last day in office is January 2027. That's 12 months from now. And every single political analyst in America knows he's running for president in 2028. He hasn't Announced it, he doesn't have to. His entire Davos performance was the announcement. Think about it, he can't run on his California record. The homelessness crisis has tripled under his administration. State's official budget deficit is $27 billion, but independent auditors from Stanford University just released a report showing the real number when you include unfunded pension liabilities and deferred infrastructure costs is closer to $85 billion. The tech industry is fleeing the state. Meta just moved its headquarters to Texas. Apple is building its new campus in Arizona. Tesla's gone, Oracle's gone, Hewlett Packard Enterprise gone. So what does Newsom do? He can't run on jobs. He can't run on fiscal responsibility. He can't run on housing, so he runs on being the anti-Trump. He positions himself as the global statesman, the guy who can repair America's reputation, the man who stood up to authoritarianism. When everyone else cowered, it's brilliant politics. It's also completely disconnected from the reality of governing. Let me read you something. This is from the California Legislative Analyst's Office, released January 10, 2026. The state's general fund is projected to end fiscal year 2025 to 2026 with a structural deficit of $35.2 billion, $35 billion, not $27.35. The difference: the governor's office doesn't include certain categories of spending in its official budget calculations. They exclude CalPERS pension obligations. They exclude bond debt service on infrastructure projects that haven't broken ground, yet they exclude the cost of legal settlements the state has already lost but hasn't paid out. When you include those items, which any private company would be required to include under standard accounting principles, the deficit is $35 billion, and it's getting worse. The report projects that by 2028, if current spending continues, the structural deficit will exceed $50 billion. That's larger than the entire GDP of 90 countries. So while Gavin Newsom is on stage in Davos explaining to Europeans how to build a sustainable economy, his own state is hemorrhaging cash at a rate that would make a drunken sailor blush, and the people paying the price aren't the tech billionaires they left. The people paying the price are the 117,000 families who are about to lose their housing. Let me tell you what that looks like on the ground, because the numbers are abstract until you see the human cost. I want you to picture Maria Gonzalez. She's 53 years old. She works as a home health aide in Oakland. She makes $18 an hour. She's been on a Section 8 voucher for 7 years, ever since her husband died, and she couldn't afford their apartment on her salary alone. Her voucher covers $850 of her $12 rent. She pays the difference out of pocket. On January 14th, her landlord received a notice from HUD that her voucher would not be renewed after February 28th. On January 16th, she received an eviction notice, 60 days to vacate. Where is she supposed to go? She works full-time. She's been at the same job for 9 years. She's never missed a rent payment in her life. And now, because of a budget decision made in Washington and ignored by a governor who's too busy schmoozing in Switzerland, she's gonna be homeless. Multiply Maria by 117,000. That's the crisis Newsom is pretending doesn't exist. And you know what makes it worse? California has the money to fix this. The state has a rainy day fund of $24 billion. It was created specifically for emergencies. Newsom could release those funds tomorrow and cover the HUD shortfall for 2 full years while negotiating a long-term solution with the federal government. But he won't, because if he spends the rainy day fund, he can't campaign in 2028 on fiscal responsibility. He needs that $24 billion sitting in the bank so he can tell voters he's a prudent manager of public resources. So instead, 117,000 people lose their homes. This is the choice: political ambition versus human beings, and Newsom chose ambition. Now let's talk about the Davos optics, cause they matter. Who paid for Newsom's trip to Switzerland? You did, California taxpayers. The governor's office won't release the exact cost, but based on previous international trips, we can estimate first-class airfare for Newsom and his security detail approximately $40,000, hotel accommodations at the Intercontinental Davos approximately $15,000 for 3 nights, ground transportation, meals and incidentals, another $10,000 total, cost to taxpayers $65,000 minimum. What did California get in return for that investment? A viral video clip of Newsom calling the president stupid. That's it. No trade deals, no investment commitments, no policy changes, just a soundbite that helps Newsom's 2028 presidential campaign. You paid $65,000 for campaign ad. And here's the kicker: while Newsom was in Davos, the California State Assembly was in session debating an emergency appropriation to address the HUD crisis. The bill would have released $5 Billion from the rainy day fund to cover the voucher shortfall. Newsom's office sent a letter to the Assembly leadership, opposing the bill. Opposing it, his official reason: we cannot set a precedent of using emergency funds for federal budget shortfalls. Let me translate that for you: we cannot set a precedent of actually helping people during an emergency, because it might make me look fiscally irresponsible when I run for president. That's what it means. That's the calculation. And the Assembly, which is controlled by Newsom's own party, killed the bill. The vote was 51 to 29. 51 Democrats voted against housing 117,000 families because their governor told them to. This is what I mean when I say Newsom is playing global chess for his 2028 campaign while the pieces on California's board are being knocked down. He's not governing California anymore. He's auditioning for a bigger job, and the audition requires him to be everywhere except California. Davos in January, the Munich Security Conference in February, the G7 summit in June. He's building an international profile while his state burns, and I mean that literally. Let's not forget that California is still recovering from the wildfires that destroyed 12,000 structures last year. The state promised disaster relief to those families. The checks still haven't gone out. The official reason: budget constraints. We don't have the money, but we have $65,000 to send the governor to Switzerland to insult the president on international television. Do you see the pattern? Do you see what's happening? This isn't about policy differences. This isn't about Trump versus Newsom. This is about a political class that has completely lost touch with the people they're supposed to serve. Newsom is the avatar of that class, the guy who talks about climate change while flying private jets, the guy who locked down restaurants during COVID while eating at the French Laundry, the guy who lectures about inequality while his net worth is north of $20 million. And now he's the guy who goes to Davos to talk about American leadership while 117,000 Americans in his own state are being pushed into homelessness. The cognitive dissonance is staggering, but it's not just cognitive dissonance, it's a deliberate strategy, because Newsom knows something that most politicians know but won't say out loud. Foreign policy makes you look presidential. Domestic policy makes you look like a manager, and managers don't win presidential elections. Visionaries win presidential elections. So Newsom is constructing a vision: California as a nation-state, a progressive beacon that can stand independent of Washington, a place where European values of social democracy can thrive despite the chaos of American federal politics. It's a compelling narrative. It's also a fantasy, because California is not a nation, it's a state, and states cannot conduct foreign policy. States cannot print money. States cannot run permanent deficits without consequences. Those consequences are coming. The bond market is starting to notice. California's credit rating was downgraded last month from an A to an A-. That might not sound like a big deal, but it means the state now pays higher interest rates on its debt over the next 10 years. That downgrade will cost California taxpayers an additional $11 billion in interest payments. $11 billion, that's $11 billion that could have gone to schools or infrastructure or housing. Instead, it's going to Wall Street, because investors no longer trust California's fiscal management. And Newsom's response: he went on CNBC and blamed the credit agencies for not understanding California's unique economic model. That's a quote: unique economic model. You know what that means in plain English. We spend more than we take in, and we're hoping economic growth will eventually catch up. Spoiler alert, it won't. The California economy is 26% dependent on the tech sector. That sector is contracting. Venture capital investment in California startups dropped 43% last year. 43%. That's not a temporary blip. That's a structural shift. Investors are moving to Austin, to Miami, to Nashville. They're leaving California because the regulatory environment is hostile. The tax burden is crushing and the infrastructure is crumbling. But you won't hear Newsom talk about that in Davos. In Davos, he talks about how California is leading the world in renewable energy, which is true. California has more solar capacity than any other state. California also has the highest electricity rates in the continental United States. The average Californian pays 32 cents per kilowatt hour. The national average is 14 cents. So yes, California is leading on renewables. California is also making energy unaffordable for working families. These are the trade-offs Newsom doesn't mention. These are the inconvenient truths that don't fit the narrative of California as a progressive utopia, and they're the reason he can't run on his California record. So instead, he runs on being the guy who stood up to Trump, the guy who defended democracy, the guy who kept the faith with our European allies. It's a good story. It's also not his job. His job is to govern California. His job is to make sure 117,000 families don't end up on the street. His job is to fix the $35 billion deficit. His job is to address the exodus of businesses and middle-class families, and he's failing at all of those things. So let me bring this back to the fundamental question: why is the governor of California in Switzerland negotiating foreign policy? The answer is simple: because he's not running for re-election as governor of California. He's running for president of the United States, and everything he does from now until November 2028 will be designed to advance that goal, even if it means abandoning the people who elected him, even if it means 117,000 families lose their homes, even if it means California's economy continues to deteriorate. This is the reality of modern American politics. Ambition trumps responsibility, image trumps substance, and the people who pay the price are always the same: working families who can't afford to leave, who don't have the luxury of international travel, who just want a stable place to live, and a government that actually works. I started this report by asking you to picture Gavin Newsom breathing crisp Swiss mountain air while 117,000 Californians receive eviction notices. That's not hyperbole, that's not partisan spin, that's the literal timeline of events, and it tells you everything you need to know about who Gavin Newsom is and what he values: global ambition, local failure. That's the verdict. If you want to watch this house of cards collapse in real time, subscribe to this channel right now. We're gonna follow this story as the evictions start, as the deficit grows, and as Newsom continues his international apology tour, pretending to be president of the United States. Share this video with everyone you know, cause the mainstream media will not tell you this story. They're too busy praising Newsom for his courage in standing up to Trump. And one more thing, comment below and tell me, do you think a governor should be allowed to conduct foreign policy? Do you think the Logan Act should apply to state officials? Because this is a constitutional question that's about to become very relevant. If Newsom can negotiate with European governments independently of the federal government, what's to stop Texas from negotiating with Mexico? What's to stop Florida from making deals with Brazil? Where does it end? These are the questions we need to be asking. These are the conversations we need to be having, and we need to be having them now before this becomes the new normal. I'm Dana Sterling, and this is Maddo News. The truth is in the numbers, and the numbers don't lie.